So this room in here, this is the guard room, and earlier in many stories I've so far talked about the sentries. And this room in here is actually where those sentries were stored, as I like to say, whenever they weren't active and outside. But what, other than that, is unique about this room is that it's one of the very few rooms that has a well built into the floor. And that well is right over there in that corner. I'm going to open that up in just a moment. Another thing about this garrison, this area, is that not all the soldiers actually live inside the fort. A good deal of them were married, and they were living in what's known as family barracks down on kind of the northern side of Brunswick Street. At the time, they would have been called Barracks Street. These family barracks were not built very luxuriously, and they were overall built quite cheaply, really. And as a side effect of this, when they caught fire and went up, they really went up. And such a thing did happen one day. It was actually Christmas Eve in the mid-1850s. And the fire engulfed the barracks. Thankfully, I can say, no one was critically injured in this fire. But one thing that did happen is the guard detachment were rushing in and out of this room, all over the place, because this particular guard detachment, one of its jobs was to raise the alarm in case of a fire, and they were often mobilized and sent out to help put out that fire. So there would have been soldiers storming in and out of this room constantly as they were rushing downtown to go and put out this fire. And where they would have been getting the water from was, of course, none other than this well over here. At the end of the night, when finally the fire was defeated and all the soldiers were heading back to their barracks, the guard detachment was brought together for a roll call, just to make sure no one's run off. Because just for the same reasons that the soldiers were locked in their barracks, they needed to be kept an eye on because desertion was a big deal back then. So when they get back together and they do that roll call, it's immediately noticeable one person's missing. And that person is none other than the sergeant who should have been calling the roll call. He was nowhere to be found. So they assumed that he must have taken his chance and deserted. He ran off. And they spent some time looking for him. But they don't find him anywhere, which means he must have already made it out of town. He must have already gone away. So they spend some time searching for that sergeant, but of course to no avail. Months go by and the sergeant never comes up. They never find him. Someone else is promoted to take his place. And months go by. And it's early into March when finally they discover where their sergeant went. In the months between this well right here started protruding this foul odor, and very occasionally this black ooze is found dragged up with their water. But that's all put to rest when finally they do drag up a whole piece of sergeant. And they discover very immediately that they have been a bit closer with their sergeant these past few months than they would have liked, because he very much has ended up at the bottom of this well here. Now, there's a bit of a debate on how this sergeant has ended up to the bottom of the well. Some think that in the confusion there would have been water spilled all over this floor, he would have been walking around, and he simply slipped and he fell to the bottom of the well. It's about 150 feet deep, and sergeants, they aren't very light on gear when they're wearing their full battle dress, or their full marching order as it's called. It's very possibly sank straight to the bottom. However, some people have a bit of a different theory, is that being a drill sergeant, one of the privates that would have been in this area had enough of it, and they ran him through with a bayonet and pushed him in the well to hide him. But the second they found the sergeant at the bottom of the well, they condemned it, and it was never used for any purposes again. But what is true is that his body was never recovered. And to this day, it still has not been recovered. Now, I'm told that at this point, every piece of his body would have eroded away. There would be nothing left. But you still can't say that any remains of that sergeant is at the bottom of this well.